So, I'm not sure how popular or obscure this animation is, but it is something I've been wanting to discuss for quite a while. It's this little animation from my childhood called The Dancing Pumpkin. Based on the book of the same name, The Dancing Pumpkin will be released September 26, 2000, gracing the screens with its, well, let's be honest, lackluster animation. Though you can clearly feel the passion of the team behind it, the animation leaves much to be desired. For this reason, and for the sake of everyone's eyes, I'll be primarily discussing the remake that was released in 2017. Yeah, you heard me right. Remake. This Halloween underdog got the full-on remake treatment. As such, this video will be a bit different, where I'll go through the story of a version that I'm less familiar with, then the differences between the versions, and finally my personal impact and review. So, let's get right to it. We open on a crisp October night, the title character springing into life to enjoy a night of dancing. During his indulgence, the messenger pumpkin Pericles would inform him of an evil ogre named Fink Grinder, who plans to teach monsters the way of torture and pain. Joined alongside the kids Chris and Heather, they would summon the warriors known as Thunderbellies as protection and dash off to get help from the King of Pumpkins. On their travels, however, they would be ambushed by a trio of witches, Triacus, Isurus, and Gingly, who frees one of the Thunderbellies with Chris inside. The main group would continue their trek in order to get help now for both of the problems at large. With the help of Rotundra, King of the Pumpkins, they are given amulets that will allow the manipulation of sunlight, the weakness of ogres. Now with the tool of Fink Grinder's demise, Pericles would dash off with a squad of scouts to find what happened to Chris and the Thunderbelly. Up high in a cloud house, the witches would keep the Thunderbelly for a ransom, only to discover Chris inside. As opposed to being eaten, he would take up an offer from Gingly to be trained as a warlock. After the other two witches take off, Chris is introduced to a flying snake by the name of Ponce de Leon, who would aid in destroying the Cloud House and sending Gingly to the bottom of a lake. Alongside his new friend and the thawed Thunderbelly, the trio discover a campfire made by two skeletons named Helgi and Finnbogi, who will also be joining in on this trip. Whilst talking amongst themselves, they'd be found by Pericles and be taken to the others where they plan their moves, Fink Grinder's castle waiting in the distance. The heroes make their way inside, splitting up as they go off to find the location of Fink Grinder, getting unfortunately trapped in a dungeon where they're to be feasted on. Luckily, they're able to help Helgi and Finnbogi escape and fend off Fink Grinder. Through the quick thinking of the Dancing Pumpkin, he's able to bite the ogre and give Heather an opportunity to feed him sunflowers, a poison to ogres. The skeletons lead Fink Grinder away to tire him out while Ponce and the Thunderbellies come in to free the trio. With the sun well up, they rip the blinds off the windows, finding Fink Grinder isn't in the direct light, so they use the amulets to blast the ogre and end him for good, turning him into nothing more than a plant of skunk cabbage. Halloween is now safe once again, thanks to the protection of the Dancing Pumpkin. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. The story is really cheesy, and that's what I love about it. It really does feel like one of those obscure movies that are just so charming. That being said, what did I think as someone who grew up on the original? Well, the animation is certainly a step up, with every character looking far better than they did. That is, except for Fink Grinder himself, unfortunately, who I thought was the best looking character in the original, and he just kinda looks worse here. Where in the original he looked kinda gross and menacing. The new one looks a little too basic, plus he's less impactful than he was before. For example, when he's calling out the Dancing Pumpkin's bluff, he just reaches through the bars, whereas in the original, he's so big and strong that he pries open the bars with his bare hands to reach in. His death as well is severely underwhelming. He just turns into some vines and becomes the plant. In the original animation, his demise looks disgusting and brutal and leaves an impression. Moving away from Fink Grinder though, what are a few other differences between the films? Firstly, the cast of kids is halved from 4 to 2, opting to leave out Joyce and Nicholas, which I believe is a good step as you only need 2 for the story. However, they removed the scene of the kids discovering the secret of the Dancing Pumpkin being alive. Chris and Heather just already know about how everything works. This leaves the audience out of the loop as they aren't taught along the kids of how this world works. Pericles is a completely new character, serving as a guide of sorts, which does work nicely since the other 2 kids got removed. He's a fine replacement. A very thankful change was Gingli merely training Chris to be a warlock. In the original, she actually wanted to marry this little boy, which just fell off even when I was a kid. Finally, the means of Finkrider's death are changed. As opposed to just ripping open the curtains and sealing his fate, they rope in these kind of pointless amulets. Among other added scenes, these are just the notable changes. Overall, which do I prefer? Well, on a visual standpoint, I have to go with the remake. It's far more pleasing to look at now that technology has advanced, and I do actually recommend watching this one more than the original. However, for how its story is laid out, I still prefer a bit of the original. A few of the minor changes from the remake can be added in, but the original just told the story a bit better, I think. In fact, I might make a follow-up video on how I would have rewritten this story to create a bit more impact. Some things aren't expanded upon or even come up later in the story, and those need to be given the proper light. It is unfortunate how obscure the story even is, as I couldn't even find a copy of the original book it's based on anywhere. Though I am happy to be in the minority who do have nostalgic ties to this charming story. But with that, we have 3 memories left to be shared. Be sure to subscribe, come back to see what remains. I promise the remaining are far less obscure.